a financial consultant, and the right person for us to talk about the major one, which has got to do with the economy. Good morning, Doc.
Good morning, Doc.
I hope you're well.
Yes, by His grace I am.
All right, thank you very much for joining us this morning. Just on the broader front, what do you make of the state of the nation as it's constitutional, though, but what do you make of over the years, whether we have actually made it the state of the nation or we have used it as a means of what will be done?
Thank you very much. First, I was
imagine presentation in a way.
In disguise.
Yeah.
Good morning to your cherished viewers. As you rightly mentioned, it is enshrined in Article 67 of the Constitution.
Yes.
Every year, at least within the first quarter of the new year, the President would avail of himself to the good people of this country through Parliament to let people know what actually transpired in the previous year, and also shed more light on the activities of the current year. And so invariably it is a summary of what the President hitherto would have permitted his or her finance minister to lay before the good people in the preceding year. And therefore it comes as no surprise that some people would equate it to the budget reading and whatever, but this is more of a summary. And what is most important is that by the time the President makes his presentation, whatever might have happened after the budget presentation would be captured in it. And so this is more of an updated version of what we should expect in the year and what has already been done in the previous year. So I do not expect this to deviate from the norm with regards to presentation. However, as you rightly mentioned, certain facts and those assurances were laid bare before the people last year. Notable among these, if we have to look at the key areas, we have the agric, we have the industrial, and then the services sectors of the economy, and each one had its fair share of intended projects, and therefore would know exactly what has been done. Yes, and in the area of agriculture, for example, we're told the Planting for Food and Jobs program was expecting to increase the enrollment from 200,000 to 500,000 farmers. So it will get to know if indeed the Agric Ministry was able to achieve this feat, or there were some challenges that marred the realization of this objective. Also, we're told about the 2,400 extension officers to be employed to beef up the existing ones, to improve on agricultural production. Also, 50% cut on the cost of fertilizer. Is it still in vogue or it has been suspended? We'll also get to know. And also, you remember the finance minister talked about modernization of agriculture. It was for a purpose. Research has revealed that if you look at the advanced economies, it's not a matter of the number of people that is it, but the quality of farming. So this is what we head into. So not necessarily the large number. As a matter of fact, 500,000, if you compare with our population, should be near the number to provide or feed the entire nation and even have access for export. So we are gradually getting there. If you also look at the areas of industrialization, the one district, one factory, certain factories were inaugurated, if I put it that way, last year. There are others in the pipeline. And just as it has been done, if there are others to be in a way inaugurated very soon, the President might not be specific, but will just give a fair idea of what we should expect in that particular regard. The stability in power supply would also get to hear more about this, which is also helping industry. True, you realize perhaps due to the dialogue with labor, the number of labor unrests in the country has reduced considerably, and this might not be mentioned as perhaps an achievement, but as a way of applauding labor for dialoguing with government to ensure that we maintain peace and focus on productivity in the country. So this might also come up in that particular area. The railway sector development, we also expect to hear more about the Accra Tema and also to Kumasi, and also the Takoradi Kumasi Paga railway development. So so that we would be able to link up with our neighbors in the hinterlands, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and others. So in the area of we also expect to hear the air travel. We as a nation are also trying to make sure that at least we have airstrips across the country. If we have smaller airports in all the regions, it will ease the level of development and also speed up business activities.
That's true.
And wherever we've gotten to, we may also be told. Sanitation was also touched on last year, and we would be given an update, I'm sure. Fortunately, as I mentioned elsewhere, the president was an Accra boy. He is now an Accra elderly man. So he needs not to be told about the nooks and crannies of, especially the center of Accra. And it comes as no surprise to some of us that he wants to ensure that before the end of his term, Accra becomes the cleanest city.
Anyway, let's go on.
Yes, you may talk about Rwanda running away easy in this particular regard, but it is a result of commitment. And if we should also tour that particular line, it is not far-fetched. So as it stands now, we have a lot of work to do, admittedly, but it is not beyond our reach. If you consider the fact that usually it has been determined that it takes a ravaged country between 50 and 60 years to regain her economic rhythm. But it took Rwanda less than 10, 15 years to regain her economic rhythm. It means if you want to rid the capital of filth, it is not beyond us. That's the comparison I'm trying to make.
But there's been some commitment, as you mentioned, there's been some consistency too, which usually we don't really have.
It has not been consistent, that is true. If you look at the fact that in 2015, efforts were made to at least evacuate, to put in mind, the people from the Agbogbloshie area to make it ready for tourist development activity. The number there, I'm sure now, is more than the number in 2015.
Exactly.
So that is, I share in your concern. It means the efforts are not actually in the right direction. If you try to make incursion and there are impediments, it becomes difficult for you to make meaningful socioeconomic inroads. And that is where
what I've realized is that we want to be ice cream sellers, in the sense that we want to please everybody.
It becomes a challenge. That is true. And that is true to a very large extent. It is true. And the president talked about the investment of about 200 million Ghana cedis in the area of sanitation across the country, with special emphasis on the Greater Accra. And so we would get to know how far we've gone in this particular state. In the area of security, we were also told about 800 million Ghana cedis will be invested in the procurement of vehicles, uniforms, and ammunition for the security services, in the country. Well, if we've been able to secure this and even added more, we'll get to know about this. The president did not mince words when he mentioned that the level of unemployment among the youth in the country is quite alarming and worrying, and it in a way puts the nation on a time bomb. And therefore all policies of the various ministries, indirectly or directly, are geared towards addressing the youth unemployment challenges in the country. And now, so the Nation Builders Corps that actually took off would be mentioned, if it is, I'm sure not for some political coloration, but as a way of whipping up the enthusiasm among the youth, that indeed as a nation we are on course with regards to meeting their needs collectively. So these are some of the areas we expect. The performance of the economy has not been bad. We know the economy was rebased, which allowed, I'm sure we had a program on that, it allowed for the inclusion of other goods and services that hitherto we neglected, thinking they were not valuable to be added in the basket. So this has created some expansion, which also helps the foreign investor who has not visited to access the variables in terms of investment that he or she could choose from and make it easier for the investment decision to be made. The various indicators, some may be mentioned, like the reduction in inflation from 11.8 in 2017 to 9.4 in 2008, and this may also be talked about.
But even since at least you've touched on the economy, let's just start and move into that. Even with the rate of inflation, which now we're even told that it has moved from 9.4 to about 9 or so %.
Okay.
I read a report from the Economics Intelligence Unit that's saying that gain might not be sustained because of the way the city is behaving.
Okay.
And now we're moving to the 5 Ghana cities range for the city. How can we really work around this particular area? Because the projection given by the Economic Intelligence Unit that we might end up having about 11% inflation. I mean, moving from the 9 because of the way the city is behaving. We understand the Bank of Ghana also had to put in a lot of dollars in the system to at least make the level a bit, but still we're having challenges within that sector.
Yes, it is not the solution. It is not a good practice at all.
Putting the dollar in the system.
It is not a good practice at all. And I know the Bank of Ghana is now revising its note. It is not a good practice at all. Look, over the past 4 years, you realize our records reveal that the country that Ghana, trades most with is China.
China, yeah.
So if you consider the fact that for the past 5-6 years, we've been trading more using the dollar, that might not be out of place, especially when perhaps we have the countries that we dominate in terms of trade, not necessarily being China. But over the past 4 years that we've had China as a dominant trading partner, if you also set China aside, you realize because of the ease of acquiring visa to the United Arab Emirates, applying the route to Dubai for people to also bring in goods has also become quite easier. So if you know of someone in your neighborhood who has been engaging in buying and selling, you ask of the person and you don't hear of him, you might be told he or she has gone to Dubai. So in some cases, some people even think Dubai is the name of the country, but Dubai is just like, say, relegating Ghana to the background, mentioning Accra. So if you set China aside, we have the United Arab Emirates coming in handy. And also the statistics have revealed that on the average, we register about 10,000 vehicles annually in Ghana. Not those with DP and DV plates, those that attain the official registration number. There are about 10,000 of them annually. Now what it means is that the number of cars on our roads is increasing. And because of the nature of certain roads, it becomes easier for our cars to break down, and therefore there is the constant need for what? Spare parts. Now, for this reason, we realize the importation of spare parts from especially South Korea to Ghana has increased considerably. Yes, and so at least these 3 key areas or these 3 key countries have been
China, Dubai,
United Arab Emirates, and South Korea. They've been dominant in our trading activities over the past 4 years. So
I know Turkey is also coming up.
Yes, because of the constant organization of trade shows in Ghana, people are beginning to appreciate the dynamics and also ease to some extent the process of securing visa. But these 3 dominate because of the constant need for our goods from those areas. And you see, China has deliberately devalued her currency to make her country attractive to every country in the world. If you look at your currency and realize it is stronger than China's, then it will be easier for you to make the decision to go there and buy. So that is one aspect of it. Now, if you consider the fact that for the past 4 years, China, United Arab Emirates, South Korea have dominated our trading activities. And to even buttress this, in 2016, trade between Ghana and China amounted to about $5.98 billion US. 2017 was 6.67 billion, which means we increased by about 11.42% over the period. That of 2018, we are yet to determine. These figures that were determined in dollars were not appropriate. They should have been second determination of the currency. What this basically means is that the transactions between the 2 countries, Ghana, China, should have either ended in cedis or renminbi, which is the Chinese currency, and then later converted into dollars to determine its equivalent. But it shouldn't have been direct dollar value. You know, that is why we have a challenge. Now we're going to look at this. Also, if you observe carefully, the United States dollar is actually used by 17 countries and territories, including the United States. If you have the United States, you have the likes of Ecuador, we have Puerto Rico coming in, we have El Salvador, we have Guam, the American Samoa, Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands, we have the Palau and others also coming in. But the countries like South Korea, United Arab Emirates, China that we mentioned, have not adapted the United States American dollar as the official currency. You know, they have their currencies. China has the renminbi. The foreign market normally use the expression Chinese yuan. And then the United Arab Emirates has the dirham. South Korea has the won as her currency, and they are still in vogue. You know, so the question becomes, if we...
So the issue is that they deal with us in their currency.
Yes.
And we deal with them in the dollar.
That is it. So we are killing our city.
So we are killing our city.
Yes. You know, so if you live here to China to bring goods into the country, why do you go to the foreign market and exchange dollars to the to China? When you get there, you cannot go to the market and buy directly with the dollar. You have to go to the foreign market and exchange into the Chinese renminbi before you go to the market to buy. Those who might be a bit skeptical, it is, let's look at this particular illustration. Someone leaves Cote d'Ivoire to Ghana with Sappor. When he or she comes here and walks to Makola market, the person cannot buy tomatoes directly with the Sappor. The person would first have to go to the Forex Bureau, exchange into the city to ease the transaction between the buyer and the seller in the market. It is the same. So if we live in Ghana to China and we set aside the China-specific currency, for some reasons which you may come to, and then decide to opt for the dollar, then we put undue pressure on the city relative to the dollar. You know, and when we get there, we do not use it directly. We dump, quote unquote, the dollars in China and then go in for their renminbi to buy the items. So we end up increasing the price per item that we bring into the country somewhat unnecessarily. Because if we had left here with the renminbi, first, the Ghanaian currency is stronger than the Chinese renminbi. You know, yesterday when we checked, for 10 Chinese renminbi, you have about 73 pesos. What it means is that you need more Chinese currency to get less Ghana. So if you deal directly with the Chinese currency, you realize the cost of the items you even go to buy will reduce. And it will help you to also reduce the cost of your the price of your item in the market to attract more people to buy and even speed up your business process. You know, but if you go in with the dollar, it becomes a transit transaction. It is just like leaving GBC to Accra. Instead of directly driving here, you say, no, let me go through Mamobi to 37 before heading towards Accra. Meanwhile, you could just drive past the Nima traffic light and go on. So as you elongate the distance, you realize you add more to time, the fuel, and the cost of your journey. That is exactly what is happening.
So, for in turn, the other way around, when they are coming to Ghana to trade, they just come with their currency and change into the Ghana.
That is it. It becomes easier for them.
Unlike us that we have to change into a dollar and get there, we change into their currency so we can start trading.
And also to make it easier for them, because of the appreciation of technological dynamics, they may not necessarily even come with the currency. They may liaise with their bank in China, or also with a bank in Ghana here to wire the amount into their account. So when they come, it becomes easier for them to access it. You know, some have approached me to state that if you suggesting that we go with the Chinese currency and also the United Arab Emirates and others, then you're asking us invariably to leave Ghana with sack loads of money into the other country, which would expose us to security challenges. If that is not the case, you know, if you move in, most businessmen and women have bank accounts. So you can deposit the CD amount you want to travel with, and then your bank will liaise with the company you want to buy the goods from over there, its bank. and then there will be wire transfer, and so it will be interbank transaction, which will minimize the pressure that we put on our forex markets.
What about the other argument that, I mean, the dollar happens to be one of the currencies for international trade? So that's fall within the range if you decide to just use the dollar for international trade like that.
Yeah, so you use it if it is favorable. If it's unfavorable, you don't use it. You're getting the point. If we were not having challenges, then it will not be out of place. But you see, you go to places like Abosokai to buy spare parts, and they quote the price, you say it is exorbitant. Then they'll tell you, oh, it is because the value of the dollar has gone up. Dollar now costs so. It is a bad practice. We cannot attribute the increase in the price of spare parts to a fall in value of the cedi relative to the dollar. That is what we do. No, because that is not what it's supposed to be.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, so they might not know, but the Bank of Ghana, that's what since the last quarter of last year, some of us started talking about the fact that the Bank of Ghana is putting measures in place, to make sure that we have country-specific currencies in the various forex markets. So now that we trade more with China, people should not find it difficult walking to forex bureaus and then getting the renminbi to exchange, or going to get the dirham, or getting the South Korean won, and even if people still think they will carry sackloads of money, the government can prevail on the various banks through the Bank of Ghana to make special arrangements for our businessmen and women who travel to China, to South Korea, and also to United Arab Emirates. If there are fees that they charge on these wire transfers, which actually discourage people from using the bank, then those fees could be waived or discounted considerably. Because when you do that, we will be able to allow the city to give a strong sign of financial relief. And you see, in finance, the more your currency slips, the stronger it becomes. And that was demonstrated during the First Republic.
The more your currency slips,
the stronger it becomes. It slips. It gets the
time to sleep. Okay.
Yeah, the more your currency slips, the stronger it becomes. What it means is that when it slips, it means most of the goods and services your people need are found in the country. And therefore, there's no need for you to constantly exchange your currency into a foreign currency to get what you want. But the more it is dragged into a foreign currency, then the weaker it becomes. So this is where we can stabilize it. As we speak, the stability of the cedi, the power does not lie in the hands of the government. It lies in the hands of you and I, and especially the businessmen and women.
But they're the ones complaining, actually.
Yeah, that is because, so if they do not know, these are some of the solutions we're mentioning here. Yes, perhaps we did not know that it was inappropriate to be going to China with dollars. It was inappropriate to be going to Dubai with dollars. It was inappropriate to be going to South Korea with dollars, because you end up increasing the cost of your production. When production here basically refers to the goods that you buy, which also affect the price per item that you also sell. But if we should trade in the specific currency, you realize one, it will help to stabilize the cedi relative to the dollar. And those who actually apply the route to United States, all right, and the other dollar-specific countries will be able to get a relatively moderate exchange rate, because the pressure on the dollar will reduce.
What about those who also argue that the challenge has also got to do with we still not getting hold of the fiscal discipline that we're supposed to, although the president has put in place a team to help us really achieve that. I was listening to Dr. Joe Abis, I was yesterday on one of the radio stations, who said that in as much as the arguments about importation, exportation, and the way we're trading with the dollar and all that is part of the reason, but one aspect too is the fiscal discipline that has not been really adhered to, which is also contributing to the rate at which the dollar is
very good. Now, let me explain how this comes into play. We talk about fiscal discipline. Basically, we're looking at the situation where we try to moderate our expenditure within our means as a nation. And therefore, the total amount we expect to expend in a year should not exceed the total amount we expect to receive considerably. That is what is being talked about over here. Yeah, so this is where the challenge comes in with the fiscal discipline. In most cases, you realize after the first 7 years of our independence, from the 8th year onwards, we resorted to borrowing to be able to provide more social infrastructure facilities for the nation. And so borrowing has been part of this nation for relatively a long period. And as we speak, for almost every year now, we have a loan debt that comes due for repayment. Now, this is the submission that people are talking about. If we had borrowed enough in time past and it is due for repayment, then in a particular year, the government is under obligation to make sure that a huge sum of money is repaid. Now you realize most of our loan contracts are rated in dollars.
Yes.
And therefore, even with the European countries, most of them are even in dollar terms. So the repayment is done in dollars. Now for the nation is obliged to make the repayment in dollars. And in some cases, when we have more than one loan becoming due for payment in a year, then we're talking about either millions of dollars or billions of dollars. That is the basis for the fiscal argument. You know, so if the government alone is committed to repaying millions of dollars, and because the dollar is not our currency, the international standard does not allow Ghana to print dollars, even if it has the sophisticated machine to do so. The dollars must come in through trading activities.
Exactly.
So if the government has intended projects or goods and services transactions that would bring in a certain amount in dollars, you realize we may retain the money as a form of loan repayment, and therefore the amount of dollars available to be distributed to our businessmen and women will reduce. That is the basis for his submission with regards to the fiscal discipline. You know, so that is also not wrong. It is true to some extent. It is true to some extent. And also besides that, you realize the crude oil that we extract here exported, and then we import the refined crude oil to sell in the country. So almost every month, besides the loans, the government is also under obligation to raise millions of dollars to import crude oil into the country.
Even with that argument, I mean, in as much as the price of this crude oil goes up, don't we also make some gains then by selling it out too? So that should make up for the balance.
Yes, but even here, I'm not even looking, the differential, that is good. But we're looking at the situation where you're going to buy. You know, we are not losing. We're not even talking about losses here.
Yes.
But the fact that even if you would derive a profit, you're right, you first need the millions of dollars to go and pay for the crude to bring the crude into the country. And because the dollars are not your currency, it becomes difficult for you to mobilize in addition to the debt payment. That is the argument here. Yes, so it is not about loss. But first you need to go and pay for. You know, so how do you even mobilize the dollars if you've not been able to do so through the sale of cocoa, gold, you know, timber, bauxite, and what have you? So it becomes quite a challenge. And that is the basis perhaps for the fiscal discipline argument. And besides
let me activate the phone lines and see if we can read some messages. So you can join us by calling us on 0302 770222 0302 770222 0302 770222. And let me just read some other messages that I have here. This one says that good morning, and Filippo watching live. Okay, I can't wait to hear the president explain the nation's in the nation's address, and come what may, everything will be successful. Greetings to. Okay, thank you very much, Filippo. I have another message here. Good morning. Please, may I ask Doug if today NAPCO will be mentioned? If yes, what is the president going to say about it? Is he going to mention hungry corps? Okay, trainees who are working without allowance for almost 4 months now. Only selected groups have been paid November and December allowance. So what is the president going to say about this particular program, Doc? Okay, thank you very much. This one says that good morning. Ghana as a nation is not doing well in terms of business as a nation. There's a lot of medium of payment, which Ghana is not among. To mention